Imagine opening your email to find years of history deleted. Only a single email remains. A ransomware request for $2 million. You think to yourself, how could this happen to me? You see, there's two types of companies. Those that have been hacked and those that will be hacked. The weight of responsibility comes crashing down on you. It's the sort of responsibility you feel when your family is craving a delicious pizza. You finally open the box only to find the most cringe-worthy topping that you mistakenly ordered. Join Pineapple on Pizza podcast as John and George, along with guest executives, discuss the most common and craziest cybersecurity risks, followed by actionable tips and strategies that can be implemented to protect your cyber risk pie. Pineapple on Pizza is hosted by Omnistruct.
Welcome to another episode of Pineapple on Pizza. Today's guest is Chief Executive Officer of Drone Industry Systems, FAA commercial drone pilot. Welcome, Mike DiCosola.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good.
And of course, we just talked about that too. So how badly did I butcher that one? And can you correct me if I was wrong?
Pretty close. DiCosola.
DiCosola. All right. Well, thank you for that.
Sure.
So we'll get started here with our first question, and this is what leads. This is what sets our tone. So
sure.
If cyber risk was a pizza and the frameworks are the crust, what's the riskiest topping you've ever seen, and what topping would you equate that to?
The riskiest topping. Okay. Oh, that's a good one. Well, I think it's really about spoofing in what industry we're working in, because if you can have a bad actor using any type of spoof, you don't know if it's a real drone or not, right? And so that could be a cybersecurity risk all in itself, is not understanding which drone is going to be operational within the scope of an approved, what we would call node versus something not approved.
Oh, gotcha.
And how is that tracked specifically?
So
what exactly is being spoofed there?
Well, let's say that there's a bad actor that actually puts in a spoof, how do we know that actual characteristics of that actual CPU is something we can understand the data with? Is it recognizable? So we're working with proof of reputation in order for us to have the nodes police each other. That's the way we're going to set it up. So that way the nodes will be able to say, hey, the reputation of this actual node, which to us, everything's a node. If it's a CPU, it's a node. It's sitting on a node-centric mesh network we're building. What is the characteristics of that actual action of that data? And is that out of character? Because if it is, then it can be forensically examined by vaulting it and not letting it populate within the actual blockchain. So you want to be able to keep it on the blockchain, but you want to be able to not populate it within it if it's not recognizable.
Got it. And so now what topping would you equate that to when you're talking about pizza?
Well, this is a good one, because I'm trying to just put the analogy in my head here. So if I was to say, it would probably be the exposure points, right? So how do we equate that to an actual pizza and its toppings? Let me see.
I guess more or less that's just letting the pizza sit out too long.
Yeah, that's
the exposure.
Yeah,
I'm going to say turkey pepperoni, but I don't know if that's right. So because turkey pepperoni is pretty good.
Yeah, I would say it's a good point. So let's say that exposure of that pizza, maybe you don't let somebody walk into the kitchen. One of the things that we want to look at is also the endpoints, right? Because that can be considered like maybe the pepperoni, as you put each of these toppings on the network, those toppings can be networks, should I say, those toppings can be considered IoT, edge. And then when you consider it that way, that becomes an exposed entry, because now you're sitting there every time you have an operator, a customer, or any kind of software access, you're leaving yourself exposed to entries that are vulnerable. So how do you avoid that? I would say consider it like pepperoni, right? There's a lot of it all over the place. how do we actually mitigate that risk? We need to make sure that each of those pepperonis, let's consider them nodes, we got to make sure at the edge that they're actually policing each other, because you need at least a cluster of them communicating together to validate the data prior to it populating.
Okay.
Man, I definitely want to eat your pizza if you're monitoring all of that, right?
Well, that's what that's what we're building on. That's what we're trying to do, is a full stack app to so that way it's a node centric mesh network, and it has the scalability, to do that.
Gotcha. And so where do the threat actors tend to come from when this happens? Like, are they already on the pizza or in the pizza shop already, or are they, outside trying to get in to eat the pizza sort of thing?
Well, so if you could think about, like, for instance, one of the things that we're building right now is called the smart delivery doorbell, and it's a data miner. So now that data miner is sitting at the edge, and if you think about it, whoever's there can access that if they understand networking and everything. If it's not protected, if there's no biometrics, or if there isn't, so we want to be able to create biometric access with tier level authority, both on the operational side, but also on the consumer side, because you might have somebody who's delivering a pizza, and that pizza, who was the person who actually put it in the drone. So you have one exposure sitting on that network, right? And then, so biometrics might be important to say, look, here's the blockchain of where this genesis of data came from. This is a validated data, but it's also a validated person behind the actual entry. And now let's say that the operator who's now going to operate it, who's the operator? What's the level of access? And did we do any biometric access for that? And then when it gets delivered, who is the actual receiver? How do we confirm that receiver? Because those are all exposure points that, and we need to take all that into consideration. Who actually received the product, or, how do we make sure we release the product to the right person?
Oh yeah. So this is actually, my understanding of your business is that this is actually potentially a real scenario, like delivering a piece, because you're in the drone delivery kind of business in terms of no matter what's being delivered, right? So this is a real practical application in delivering a pizza.
Yes, and so I was trying to pull from where I can connect this, but it's an exact analogy.
That's amazing. Yeah. No, I get it. I think we sometimes we look at delivery as and since we're talking about pizza already, right? So it's easy to confuse the analogy with the reality. So, but you figure out a way to do both in one shot. So application. Yeah.
And if you look at it, like, you have layer 0 would be maybe the crust, layer 1 would be maybe the sauce, and layer 2 the cheese. So you want to kind of control it from a layer 0 network, in order to really have an understanding of what the layer 1, layer 2 is doing, and to mitigate risk in that fashion. You also make it faster, you make it more scalable, more interoperable, and we want to make the data agnostic. So, the whole system we're building, our system is being built as we speak. It's been a while that we've been working on it, and the concept is to design a full stack mobile app that allows for third-party integration of interoperable hardware, as well as we have agnostic software in terms of data. We want an open platform, so that way we can actually bring in third-party approved drones, not just ours, or third-party landing pads, charging stations. And then we look at this as nodes, because everybody needs to pull from this data to really get the situational awareness. And that's whether it's weather information, telemetry, or whatnot.
Gotcha.
So
For me, that's really exciting to me, especially if there's a pizza coming to my door. But it's an area of expertise in terms of something that I've seen before, like interoperability in general. So that's neat.
Yeah, and the pizza is really just going to be determined on the size. The drone's going to be dictating what's the payload, how much it can handle. But you have a lot of cyber risk on all levels of this process. What if you don't get the correct weather information? Somebody hacked the weather, and you have a plan based on weather being certain, type of information at the other end. So where is this information coming from? How many access points are there? How do we monitor this and, maintain a SOC 2 or a CMMC, or how do we keep a layer 0 situation maintained with zero trust,
Absolutely. So in regards to your role as CEO, what keeps you up at night?
What keeps me up at night? Getting to market as fast as possible before the market starts. So
Ahead of the market. Yeah.
yeah, because to me, I'm creating a platform, and I made a 10-year plan. I've been working on this 8 years. We filed a lot of patents over the time. We've done a lot of R&D, and we had to look at the full process of the turnkey solution, not just one aspect of it, but how everything affects everything. And so right now, the FAA, we're on year 9, and the FAA is just about to approve, we're hoping this year, beyond visual line of sight at night vision, which at that point, so to me, I'm still buying time because they're still waiting for these last approvals to be able to do fleet delivery and get the proper waivers in to deliver. So we're right on time for what we're trying to achieve within the time frame that is allocated by the FAA, because they still got to get those congressional rules approved on those final aspects. So for us, it's these cyber is everything, because it's not just on the actual network system. It's also on the mobile app. We want to be able to accept crypto. We're working on our own actual wallet, our own digital wallet that will accept crypto as a payment for delivery. And, that means we're going to need biometrics for accessibility on that. So we want to be able to make this a real UI UX experience that is just having all the features necessary, but keeping the customer within its environment, while still allowing the operator and the vendor, it could be a restaurant, a retailer, keeping them in their environment, because now we're introducing new exposures every time we bring them in. So these are the things we're trying to pay attention to.
Absolutely makes sense.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, you brought up the FAA, but do you have any other big challenges when it comes to meeting regulatory requirements today?
Well, you're going to have clearly, we're going to have zero trust with, if we do any DoD work, or if once we start getting into those contracts, they're going to require those levels of requirements. But there's also going to be, you still have localization type, what's the municipality rules, what's the state and fed rules, how do you marry them together, right? So these are going to be all issues that are coming, but there's a lot of support within the FAA and the associations that have gotten together to actually make this a reality. And so these issues are going everywhere from, like, what's the noise mitigation, hearing a drone fly by, to how high you can go, if you're mixing in national airspace with other different types of aviation, and all these different things come into play. And so we're waiting for some of this stuff to go through, without being too premature on moving forward, so, and they're doing a great job. The industry at large is really progressive in trying to make this a reality.
I definitely look forward to it.
Yeah, I can't even imagine how I can think of I can probably think of 100 things that, in different ways and shapes and forms and regulatory and for example, the issue of, clearly you got to know where the drone is going, right? So all of a sudden you're dealing with potentially personally identifiable information of a customer during delivery, if it's B2C, right? So, I mean, and believe me, I can think of a lot more, but there's gotta be, you must not sleep at all.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I really don't. I really don't sleep much. I just like, it's like one of those thinking kind of things, but I enjoy it, because it's like, what's the problem? What's the solution? And you already touched base on a few of those things, right? Privacy laws, and, flying over somebody's privacy, of their home, how is that going to be affected? And, will somebody not want that? Metadata, we're making a white paper where we're creating a utility token that's going to allow for crypto rewards for your data. Rather than taking your data from you, you can participate in the metadata you wish to use. So that data can be used in translation, maybe for weather, and and maybe other transportation companies can see what that weather's like, and you're actually participating in weather safety, but you're getting crypto rewards to apply towards, let's say, your favorite vendor, food, or delivery cost. So we're trying to make a system that is frictionless, where the privacy issue becomes an incentive to where you own the data, and how you distribute that data is at your will, and participating in it is only going to enhance safety, security, and sustainability. So
that's the blockchain. I can see that. There's there's one coin in particular called Jasmine in Japan that's regulated, and that's what they're doing is the IoT, and at least in Japan. And so that makes me think of that when you talk about that is that blockchain and delivery of privacy data, right? And of course, but that's just Japan. I mean, most crypto, and this is coins, obviously, is on there's regulation issues. So I wonder about that.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
gonna be a
no,
crazy ride. It's gonna be
and
crazy.
you brought, that's a whole new level of regulations, because now it's like, okay, are you an accredited investor? Are you not accredited? Who's going to invest in that crypto? Where did you, where exactly did you set it up internationally versus locally? What's domestically authorized versus, it just becomes a nightmare, but the whole goal is you have to bifurcate everything into different categories, and you have to make those rules apply to where it belongs, and then somehow create the actual nexus between them. So that's why it's such a long process, is exactly that. It's a big process, but there are a lot of companies tackling this down. They're working very hard, and we're just one of them. But our goal in particular is to make sure that we're ahead of the game in thinking about that we're attempting, because we have three goals: safety, security, and sustainability. So how do we, in aviation, safety is always paramount, but without security, safety really has no value. You can sit there and say, yeah, well, safety is number one. Okay, but what's the security behind it? Right. So how do we protect this? And that's where a lot of the issues of everybody talking, because safety also becomes like, okay, what if you have a lost link in the middle of a 5G transfer? You're using one carrier, and then there might be some weak transition over to another carrier, and you have a lost data link. Now what happens? So like things that you're not, those types of safeties. And so so one of the things that we did is Drone Industry Systems created an infrastructure solution. We're repurposing Rooftops. That's the IP that one of the IPs we filed, turning it into drone airports. So we can take a restaurant or a retailer, or and change the rooftop, where we basically modify the rooftop, we repurpose it into a drone airport, now creating an infrastructure where we can put weather sensors there, we can put charging stations there. And the more of those you have, the more safety you have, because you can now, if you did have a lost link, where's the nearest home base? How can that drone go land back somewhere closest to it? So how you say you stay up all night, you're thinking about all this stuff. You're like, okay, what happens this? What happens that?
Yeah, I can relate to that. That idea of not just connecting over from carrier to carrier, but what we call delay tolerance networking. So all of a sudden you have a delay. You store and forward. You program to go automatically to some rooftop, right? It's something I had to deal with years ago when we were looking at first responder interoperability of radios. But this is at massive scale. So I mean, there's all kinds of challenges here that a lot of different industries are working on. I imagine not just you, that this is kind of board. Yeah,
all over the world.
Yeah, so that's exciting. That's exciting stuff.
Yeah, and if you think about it, you're not just looking at we're taking a look at this as, okay, we have certain types of networks, certain types of connectivity. How do we make it let drones frog leap between, just like an airport, right? An airport has what we call a hub and spoke environment. So the hub being an international airport, the spoke being, let's say, a Class D airspace, small little airport, mom and pop, that could be a spoke. So you have a hub and spoke environment. That's the same type of environment we could put on top of rooftops, leaving the drones away from the public, but sitting it, where it's accessible and it's still behind a parapet wall. But the bigger the rooftop, the bigger the airport, right? The more versatility you have. You might have a bifurcation of a defibrillator drone, a first responder drone, an Amber Alert drone, a traffic drone, and then you still have your delivery drone, right? So you can actually turn around and make this roof into different categories. And so now, how many different networks is that? Can you frequency hop? Do we want to there's free frequencies, but there's also pay as you go frequencies. So maybe we do an antenna that frequency hops, and that makes things safer, grabs the first one. It makes it less expensive. So you got to think about all these things.
Yeah, I can imagine. You've definitely got my brain working in overtime on ways to possibly solve it.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see. I want to see your whiteboard. That's what I'm looking for. There's got to be like just this part. Yeah, I can only imagine.
Yeah, it could get a little crazy.
That's good. So so what do you see as the future? I mean, obviously you see drones as the future, and I mean, you've definitely told us some great things to think about it. But is there anything special that we should that our listeners should know about drone delivery and security? And
Sure.
you've already covered a lot of it, but I mean, anything else you'd like to add?
So I would say that most important is going to be the safety that we discussed, but that security is what we're really talking about between the three of us here, and that security is everything. And so in order for this to really succeed, there has to be a system in place where you can find the genesis of that data, where it derived from. That way you understand who had access to it, where did it derive from, but you can also reward. It's not just the bad data, right? But it's also the good data. By knowing on the blockchain where that data came from, you can reward those people for participating in that data and actually allowing others to participate with that information. And so the success of drone delivery, and it's not, for us, drone is anything that's autonomous, taking the human out of the loop. So if you think about it, a ground robot, an autonomous car, a quadcopter, that's all autonomous. It's all the human out of the loop, but you're still using fleet to manage that. And if you're going to be using fleet to manage that, you have to be able to have some kind of trust factors at all these endpoints. And how do we do that? Well, this is where the FAA is, working on making, just like identifiers on planes, the drones are going to have identifiers, so now it's like if you shot down a drone, you just shot down like a federally protected, it's like knocking down an airplane, so they're smart in the way they're looking at this, so they're trying to make sure they're locking down all the solutions that need to be addressed.
Excellent. So tell us, Mike, what events do you go to learn more about this?
So, I mean, for myself, I try to go to, IoT events, drone events. There's advanced mobility events, which is like, the actual events where mobility becomes a thing for autonomy, so we try to go to those. In the real estate market, we're also looking at, doing the improvements of the roof, right? So that's part of our autonomous infrastructure, is creating that nexus between the digital wallet, the operating customer use, that full stack app connected to where these drone airports are going to be. So all that's got to come into play.
You had to pick an ideal roof. Which roof would you pick? Like, has that crossed your mind?
Yeah. It's actually a very good question. The perfect roof, believe it or not, is a strip mall with a bunch of restaurants or retailers or convenience stores, because you can have, if you think about it, if you had a strip mall, and usually a strip mall owner or management will have one end unit that you can do a drive-through on. But now if you can go to the tenants and say, what if I made your rooftop capable of all of you using it and leveling the playing field? And, we can allow everybody to use the drone rooftop. Now it's like everybody having an end cap, but you're providing it to all the tenants, right?
Yeah.
So whether it's a lab test, a pizza, just a retail product, fast food, it could be just simply dog food. If whatever, that's the goal, is to have it as much diversity as possible.
Yeah. No, I believe it. And the thing that comes to my mind is McDonald's, right? Because they own the ground, they're the landlord, right? It's at scale, right? Because I've tried to get on rooftops before, and sometimes the landlord just won't let you up there. So it depends on the kind of property it is. So, I mean, just the immense number of opportunities, though. Oh my goodness gracious. There's really impressive, really impressive. Yeah.
Yeah. And our 3 points are the smart delivery doorbell data miner and the smart drone landing pad charging station. So if you picture that mall we're talking about, that landing pad will be sitting right in front of the door. So that way anybody can load the food up. But the drone is sitting on top and it comes down when it's hailed.
Oh yeah, cool. Wow.
So you cut what we do for last mile logistics. We're really less than load, because we're not waiting on the hailing of something to come to us. We're actually helping the customer be in control of their own transportation, so they can sit there now and say, well, you know what, hail the drone comes down, they load it, it goes. So you're not waiting for it to come to you.
Maybe a discount if you actually have the landing pad, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. And what we're doing is we're looking to create datapreneurs, so that way, they'll be able to buy these landing pads, they'll be able to buy these doorbells, and they can actually get in the business of providing data for crypto.
Very cool.
Excellent.
Yeah. So this is where we're going with it.
So Mike, are there any books you would recommend?
Not necessarily.
Okay. That's fine. Sometimes there's great recommendations, so we always like to ask.
Yeah. No,
how about this? What excites you about the future? What things? What are you looking forward to? I mean, it sounds like you've already kind of got you've excited me about the future on this, but I mean, where do you see things in 20 years or 50 years?
So I would say there's what we call VTOLs, so vertical takeoff and landing vehicles. This is something that people will say, oh my gosh, flying cars, that's what that really is. There is no way flying cars are going to be in my lifetime. But I've got news for you. It's going to be here by 2025. And it's going to be legal, and it's going to be already in the system. I mean, they're working hard on this, NASA, FAA, and there's hundreds of companies that are put into this right now, this industry at large. So you would think like, okay, drones is one thing, but we're talking about flying taxis, flying cars. This is real. This is like, you would think this is going to be 50 years from now, but it's not. So, security is going to be a whole new level of importance. It's really going to have such a significant importance.
I remember hearing a story when the idea of drone delivery first started, that in San Francisco, the real estate market was trying to figure out how to license the airspace above the buildings in San Francisco. Whether they got there or not, how far it got or if it became a reality is another story. But so say there's all these market expanding. We've gone underground, right? We're already on the surface with cars. The next field of expansion is the air, for sure. So I agree.
Yeah, absolutely. And just weather, believe it or not, in general. Without knowing what the weather is at the departure, en route, or arrival stations, you really have no real true situational awareness. So that's going to be another level of importance.
So Mike, tell us a little bit more about yourself. I mean, where did you start out? How'd you get here? How does somebody become the drone FAA expert that you are?
No. Well, I'd like to say that you're never an expert, in my opinion. We I'm always a student, right? It's but from a standpoint of how I got here, my zeros and ones really started when I owned a factory, and I was doing CD and DVD manufacturing. So that's where you started getting into the glass masters, the duplication, replication, polycarbonate, and you started getting into that system, and we started getting into the executable files for different industries. We started working on, from there, I started going into networking, and the concepts built from a manufacturing standpoint of making CDs that were shaped like business cards. And we used to, that was one of our inventions, but it was more for shapes rather than just the business card ones. And so from there, it's just been a passion for technology. And I literally went back to school to get a double degree in aviation transportation management and in unmanned systems for marine, ground, and air, in order to make sure that the patents I filed on the stuff I just told you about actually made sense with national airspace. So I'm literally a senior right now. I'm in their master's program, and so that to me, it's like my education will continue. I will always continue to have my education because it's important to me that I'm staying cutting edge, that I'm understanding so many different levels, like batteries and the actual physics of things and how things work, because you have to really pay attention to the all-encompassing process. And so I would say that's where I've evolved from, is manufacturing. And then I've worked my way into the actual aviation side, so, and the robotics side. So that's how the connection wound up happening. And we have I'm also I have a real estate development company. So the actual going onto the roof part is not foreign to us. So the whole concept of taking these three components is what made me come up with the idea.
Gotcha.
And a blockchain. Are you doing your own blockchain, or are you using somebody else's blockchain?
So we're building off of right now other blockchain, but there's a technology that we're waiting on that will allow for all the stuff we just discussed to be mainstream. Because we need scalability, we need interoperability, and we also need to make sure that the latency is at par with the actual growth of the data that we feel is going to be necessary. And there's going to be too much data being pumped through there. So, we know what system network we're waiting for, but we're waiting for the SDKs to come out, and we're building off of that.
So you have your plate full, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
A lot of pieces.
It's like Thanksgiving every day, and the learning for you.
Yeah. Like I said, I'm a student for life, and I will always be. But so I can appreciate everybody's field and interest, and I'm always going to be learning. But that's where it came from. Those three components is real estate with the development side, the manufacturing, and aviation, which I really had to, you didn't have to go to school for aviation, but you had to go to school for aviation, and the same thing applies to the robotics side. You really got to understand, the robotics side of it. So.
Well, excellent. Why don't you tell us a little about what your company does? I mean, so you're CEO of Drone Industry Systems Corp, but go ahead and tell us what, tell us, and you've talked about it, but give us the 30-second pitch, or, tell us specifically what you do, what somebody be looking for.
Sure. So Drone Industry Systems Corp is an autonomous infrastructure solution company. So when we say autonomous infrastructure, that word Drone Industry Systems Corp, the word drone is synonymous to us with anything without the human in the loop. So we're anticipating that what will happen, we're creating the first mobile app that will allow you to have a multimodal transportation option. So that basically to us means, look, do you want the ground robot? Would you like the drone, or would you like the autonomous car? So as this starts to come into the system, there's the manual operators that we're building into the system, but eventually this stuff is going to be autonomous. So when an operator of a pizza place, for example, turns around and says, I want a ground robot, but I also want 2 drones on my roof. And by the way, that new autonomous Tesla, I'd like to have one of those deliver. So whatever that may be, right? We know that this is coming. So we're building the full stack mobile app to allow for that. And so let's say that the weather's conducive for flight on a drone today, and you order something as a consumer, just like you would Uber. We want to be able to say, hey, you know what, this vendor has these 3 choices of shipping. One is going to get there in 2 minutes. One is getting there in 4. What's the convenience fee you want to pay? You know, and go from there. But so what it is a platform, right? We're creating the nexus between the physical and digital by repurposing your rooftop into a drone airport, giving you the power back. So the actual retailers and restaurants, we're giving them back the power. We're saying, look, this is your money. This is, you know, why take 30% of your money and give it to somebody else? You know, why don't we just charge for delivery and that's it? And then if you want to market on the actual app, we can get you to market on it. So that's what Drone Industry Systems is doing, is a full stack mobile app and the nexus between that digital and the physical.
All right. So here's our introspection question, which is, if you could go back in time and give your younger self advice, what would that be?
What would that be? It's a good question. Let me think for a second here. I would say surround yourself with everybody that will know more than you, so you don't know anything compared to what they are, and have that as your crew for good. So,
yeah, mentors.
Yes.
That is one of the best things that ever happened to me was the mentors.
Oh, that's 100. If you can just fill your life with everybody that knows more than you, then you're great. You know, you're just going to keep learning. And again, I'm a student, right? So that's
so when you're not studying and when you're out doing these other things, what other hobbies do you like to do?
Pool. I like playing
pool. Or do you have time for anything else? Oh,
yeah.
Okay, pool.
Yeah, I don't get the luxury of playing as much as I would love to play, but I do love to play pool. I like playing. It used to be when you played somebody else, right? But as through time, you play the game, and you realize that game is you just playing against yourself. You know, so if you play that game where you're playing against yourself, you learn a lot more about that game than if you're playing somebody else.
Yeah, I always say I prefer a good game of billiards over a game of golf.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, absolutely. A game of 9-ball, I could sit there for a while.
Yeah.
And I won't have any competition except myself.
All right. So where can people find you, Mike?
Sure, thank you. You can reach us at droneindustrysystems.io, and you can go there. You'll be able to see the first drone MP4 NFTs that are right now just digital art, but they are it's a marketplace we've already put up there. So we're the first in the drone industry to make a marketplace for this. But we're right now it's just digital art, but once the actual doorbells are made and the landing pads that are data miners, they will have the right to actually purchase the NFTs by exchange. And those NFTs will become keys for their crypto rewards.
Oh, gotcha.
So that's where you go, to droneindustrysystems.io.
And I think you're also on LinkedIn. Is that correct?
Oh, yes, I am on LinkedIn as well. That's a good one. I'm not sure what my name is under that, but it's Mike DiCosola.
Great. Well, I think that's it. Mike, I appreciate your time, and it's been very informative. We absolutely appreciate the learning that we've done on this one. Audience, thank you. Audience, thank you for listening. If you've learned something today or laughed, tell someone about this podcast. Again, Mike, thank you.
John, George, thank you. Omnistruct, thank you.
There it is. This has been another great episode of Pineapple on Pizza. See you next time.
Thank you all for joining another great episode of Pineapple on Pizza. You can find show notes, links, and resources by visiting omnistruct.com/blog. And a huge thank you to all who are preventatively protecting organizations from cyber threats.